Well, blessings, everyone. So glad that you are stopping by once again. And in case this is your first time, let me introduce myself. I'm Marcia Jones Washington, founder of PA Women of Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care, which is an online networking ministry for women who are chaplains in pastoral care or even other forms of ministry. But I consider this space to be an extension of that, in that I do invite women in those areas of ministry to come on and talk a little bit about themselves or the work that they are doing, what God has called them to do. And so, of course, today is no different. But before I introduce our guest, I do just want to say that July is a very special month around here, because July will mark 4 years that PA Women of Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care has been in existence. We're also about to have our 4th annual Women of Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care Conference. So I want you to learn more about that, either by going to the website or looking at, you'll see some information at the end here, but yeah, you'll be hearing more about that. And also, our tickets just went on sale for that, the conference. July 1st, tickets went on sale for that. And of course, if you're a woman in chaplaincy, pastoral care, or some other form of ministry, I definitely want you to be there. But in order to celebrate all of that, I wanted to have a special guest with me today. And I mean, I really consider all of my guests to be special, but I wanted an extra special guest. And, sometimes God, he just goes over and above with some of our requests. And I feel that's what he's done today, because we are going to be spending 30 minutes with Chaplain Margaret Grun Kibben. Chaplain Grun Kibben, how are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. Great to see you and to be a part of this.
Oh, great. I am so honored that you are here, really. I truly am. And in the introduction, I mentioned that you are, well, no, did I mention that? No, that you are the first female chaplain appointed to the U.S. House of Representatives. And so that's really something quite dynamic. What does your job entail? I mean, in being that, what does that involve?
Thank you so very much. Well, and again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your group. I grew up in Pennsylvania, from the other side of your state, where you are. I think you're in Pittsburgh. I grew up just north of Philadelphia. And so I get to check a couple boxes there. I'm from Pennsylvania and a chaplain.
Yes.
And I'm here at the House of Representatives. I've been here for a little over 5.5 years now. And this is a fascinating job. I served as a chaplain in military service for 35 years. And then found myself here and found myself doing everything I've always done and nothing like anything I've ever done. But the role of chaplain here is a very interesting role. Interestingly enough, one of the things that you may not know is that the only thing on my job description is to open the house in prayer. The rest is really what you all and I would know and understand as just simple pastoral care. Ministry by walking around, connecting with people where they are, as one has access to them. And that's essentially what my responsibility is here. And it's a full-time job. And I go by the schedule of the House. So I do most of my work, obviously, with the members when they're here in town. I do some work with the staff when the members have gone home to their districts.
All right. And, I learned that you entered military or active military duty, I believe, around 1986, and that was through the Navy's Theological Student Program. And so I'm taking it, though, that you also knew at an early age that you wanted to go into ministry, some form of ministry. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So I had a sense of call when I was about 14. I had a great youth pastor in my church in Warminster, Pennsylvania. And he just had an essence about him. And I was one of those kids that everybody told their life story to. If they had issues going on for whatever reason, people would come to me for just to have a sounding board. And so I knew there was something there. And we were there at a youth retreat one time and we're at this wonderful campfire, and across the fire is my youth pastor. And I remember looking up one evening and saying, that's what I want to do. I want to be a pastor. Then flash forward a couple of years as I was sort of sorting out what it meant to be a pastor and what appealed to me about pastoral work. I realized pretty quickly that I wanted to be with my congregation every day. So that was sort of in the back of my mind. My dad had been in the Navy in World War II, had served in both the Atlantic and the Pacific campaigns. And then after the war, he stayed in the reserves and was able to get his commission. We weren't technically a Navy family, but Navy was always a part of our family. And then I had a boyfriend that went off to the Naval Academy, and I went down to visit him with his family. And I looked around at that marvelous campus, the yard, as they call it, and said, oh, man, how do I do this Navy stuff and be a pastor too? And that was when I had that sense of call specifically to military chaplaincy, when I was 17. So I did, as you indicated, I joined the chaplain candidate program. Interestingly enough, I joined that while I was still in seminary. So that was 1983. I was able to go to chaplain school and do some on-the-job training. While I was still in chaplain school, they didn't pay for my seminary, but I was able to earn money in the summer that enabled me to pay for my seminary training. But then I was able to come on to active duty very shortly after graduation.
Okay. Wow. And, and you speaking about your military background and career, I know that it is rather extensive, but you did serve in Afghanistan. And how long were you there?
I was in Afghanistan about 8 months. That was about 25 years into my career, 25 years into my career. I was deployed to Afghanistan for a little over 8 months, and I was there as the senior chaplain in country. So there were about 100 chaplain or religious ministry teams throughout the country, and it was my responsibility to keep track of them and to see where they were and what they needed and how we could coordinate our efforts.
All right. And you also mentioned about your dad, that he had been in the military himself. But how did he feel about you choosing to go that route?
Oh, he was very pleased. He was, both my parents were very proud of my decision. I will say, and because this is a gathering of women, that when I had that sense of call very early, nobody ever told me no. Nobody ever said, women don't do that. And, it was relatively early. And so we're talking late 70s when I had this sense of call. And the Presbyterian Church had only been ordaining women, not that long. And there weren't that many women in the chaplain corps. They'd only been in the chaplain corps for, about 5 years when I had this sense of that I could be a Navy chaplain. But when I started to express this, nobody ever said, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Even the recruiter was really very excited when I approached him. But my parents were very pleased, very proud of my service. And as it turns out, I said Navy was in my family. I am the 7th naval officer in my family. Only the only one in this generation, but in the past, several people served, including a woman who was in the waves.
Wow, that is really something. Okay. And, also, I was going to ask something. Oh, I didn't know at the time when you decided to go into chaplaincy that you're saying women had only been in the Corps for about 5 years?
Yes. Women joined the chaplain corps in 1974.
Okay. Wow, that is really something. And so now I also understand from listening to another interview that you're really not a political person. And so I'm just saying you're surrounded now by all of these politicians. And so your lack of, I guess, maybe knowledge about really politics, or, maybe not even being that familiar with some of the politicians that you're serving or being there for. Do you feel that was kind of an advantage or a disadvantage for you?
You've done your homework. You're absolutely right. I never followed politics. The only thing I learned in Schoolhouse Rock. And that only took me so far. So I never really spent a lot of time thought about politics nor politicians. And like most people, was somewhat dismayed by how politicians behave. So I'd sort of written those folks off. So to be in this position, or asked to be in this position, is a bit of a stretch. But that's a great way that you pose the question: is it an advantage or disadvantage? And I would have to say yes. In some ways, it's a disadvantage because you really should know the institution that you're a part of. If you're going, but everybody has to enter into the institution at some point anyway, whether you're a hospital chaplain or military chaplain or hospice, you're getting to know the institution. And so I had a blank slate walking in, and I don't tend to, use filters to prejudice me against whomever I'm serving. So that was relatively easy. And then it became an advantage because I could ask questions, and I could be very honest in saying, I don't understand what's going on. Tell me what's going on. Let me understand from you. And that would create a conversation and a relationship with both members as well as staff as the years have gone on. And I still learn something every day because this is such a complex environment. I had no idea, and I think most Americans don't have any idea how complex it is here. With respect to politicians themselves, I have learned, and I think this is really helpful for me, is they don't call them representatives for nothing. They really do represent not just their districts and the full spectrum of what makes America, America, but they also represent socioeconomic statuses. They represent certainly opinions. They represent backgrounds, personality traits, but they also represent the full cycle of human life. There are very young people here. We voted a 27-year-old into Congress from Florida a couple of years ago. We have some very much older people, well into their 80s. People are experiencing birth and death and injury and illness, and it's really a representation of what the human experience is all about. And what that has allowed me to understand is that I'm called to love them where they are, as they are. And while I always knew that, what came to my mind a number of years ago was, what I see is a microcosm of humanity, whereas God looks at all of humanity and all our quirks and differences and representation and who we are and what we bring to the table. And God loves us. And that's what I'm called. He doesn't necessarily like what we're doing. And so I can love these people and not necessarily like them. And that really is my modus operandi. And I recognize there may not be all Christian chaplains on this particular conversation, but for me as a Christian chaplain, it really came home to me when I heard within a sermon recently that there is no one whom God does not love and for whom Jesus did not die. And that's a powerful image to bring into a room of disparate and different and challenging people.
Chaplain, you said so much there, so much. Wow. But I do want to ask you too. So in terms of you having this position, so to speak, now, did you find out there was an opening for the chaplain at the, for the U.S. House and, say, oh, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, or, I contacted someone.
USA Jobs. No, no, actually, I received, I had retired from the Navy. I was doing some work for the Secretary of the Navy at the time after I retired. And I got this really bizarre email from not a government account, not a military account, but it was what I would call a civilian account. And it said, your name has been brought forward as a candidate for this job at the House of Representatives. Are you interested? And as it turns out, as bizarre as it was, and I had done my LinkedIn search, and it was some pastor from Kansas City, Missouri, and I thought, this really is spam. What is this about? Well, I called the number. I talked to the very nice man. The very nice man is a representative from Kansas City, Missouri, who in fact is a pastor, but he was asked by the Speaker Pelosi, to chair a bipartisan task force to consider a handful of names for the role of chaplain. And my name had been brought forward by Chaplain Black, who is the chaplain of the Senate. And we had served together in the Navy. And so when he heard that there was some discussion about a new chaplain, he put my name in.
Ah, yes, Chaplain Black. Now he's been there for a while, right?
He has. I think this is his 23rd year. It may be 22 or 23, but it's up there.
Okay, okay. That is great. That is so wonderful. And so, too, what about those? Now, I've seen, on the internet, you can come across so many different opinions and thoughts. But I've seen where there was someone posted about how he felt, having chaplains over these governmental entities, the U.S. House and over the Senate, that it goes against separation of church and state. And when I read that, I thought, I'm not sure he has a clear understanding about that, what that means. How would you respond, to that? Someone saying it goes against separation of church and state.
That's a very interesting subject, and it's thick. There's a lot of complexity to that as well. We started this role has existed since the first Congress in 1789. The first act of Congress was to establish the pay for the chaplain of the House and the chaplain of the Senate.
Hmm.
And so there's been a chaplain here for 237 years. And every legislative day in the past 237 years has been opened in prayer.
Mm.
Now, recognizing society was very different then, and people were very openly Christian, very specifically Christian, but more importantly, openly aware of God's involvement in our daily lives, whether they called themselves Christian or deists or other faith traditions. They understood and articulated in the common square the role of God in the affairs of humanity, to paraphrase Ben Franklin's comment in 1787. So we're talking about a culture that was established in this building from the culture that was America 250 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So take the culture, now it becomes a tradition, and culture shifts. So does culture shift enough to change the tradition? And the answer is yes, and perhaps no. It all depends on how one preserves the tradition. In the most recent past, in the last 30 to 40 years, we as a country are less aware of what it means to separate church from state. It's the Establishment Clause that's in the Bill of Rights, and what it's trying to say is that there isn't going to be a state government. There isn't going to be, as is in England, the Church of England or the Church of Sweden. There isn't going to be a state, a national church. That's what the Establishment Clause is meant to say. We're not going to establish that. Rather, we're going to protect the free expression of religion. So that being said, as a chaplain, and this was true in my military service as well, I feel very strongly that my role, and this is even more of an issue in these last several decades, is that we need to be preserving free expression of religion. Not to say that we are free from religion, but to be free, religion to be free and its expression to be free, so that no one feels like their voice isn't heard, or their voice is being squashed, if you will, quashed. So as a chaplain, then, my role is not to be a Presbyterian minister. My role, I'm not their pastor, their rabbi, their priest, their imam. I'm not that. I am their chaplain, which is to say I am there to shepherd them in their faith expression, so that they don't feel like they have to leave their faith at home when they come here to vote on the floor or to serve their country in Washington, D.C. They shouldn't have to leave faith at home. And my role here is to enable them to have a sacred space, as I can arrange that for them to have
I don't hear you.
There we go. I
was wondering, like, oh, what happened? That's what I was
hit
looking
the
at.
microphone. I'm not sure where we were, but that, in other words, so that they can have a place where they can explore their faith while they're here, and to ask questions like, you know, is this vote running contrary to my faith, and how do I deal with that? And also to have somebody who can pray for them and on their behalf. And the one thing on my job description is to open the house in prayer. So I appreciate that as being my opportunity to intercede on their behalf, to hear what's going on in the room, to understand the dynamics that are taking place and how that makes a difference in the course of the day, and to somehow capture that and to pray in such a way that everyone who chooses to can say amen from their faith tradition. That's how I would answer that.
Yes, yes. And, you know, I know that recently, in terms of the military, that the number of, let's say, recognized religions or religious faiths has been reduced from, I think it was at 200 plus, and now it's been reduced to, I forget the exact number, if it was 50 plus or 60 plus. But I'm thinking that that still should encompass a number of the major religious faiths, or even, you know, some others. Would you feel the same way about that? Or
so what has just happened in Department of Defense is that they've consolidated faith traditions. They didn't do away with, you know, hundreds of faith traditions. They consolidated them under titles. Now, whether that was done well or not, I probably shouldn't comment, but they're there. And those who endorse those chaplains from those faith traditions are still very much engaged in sending chaplains into the field. But overall, whether you have 10 or whether you have 1,000 faith traditions, every chaplain who comes to serve in military service, and frankly, and this differs depending on whether it's a university setting and you are uniquely the Catholic chaplain, or you're in a hospital setting and you're uniquely the Muslim chaplain. But in military services, where you're the one person, it's our responsibility to ensure that, yes, we provide for our own, but we facilitate for others, but most especially that we care for all. That's the unique role of the chaplain, is that we have access to every person in that institution, and it is on us to show them what love looks like, to care for them, and to allow them to be who they are in their faith tradition.
yes. And, you know, a date that I really want to bring up to you, Chaplain Grun Kibben, is January 6th, 2021. Yeah, have to ask you about that date, because, you know, this is the date of that major protest, some say insurrection that occurred, that involved many of President Trump's supporters at that time. And what I want to ask you about, though, because again, in listening to another interview, it seemed, I mean, this was another work day for you. You were there, and but it seemed you had no fear, and you talk about this hedge. And you know, I want you to share a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So it's the third day on the job, and as I said earlier, it's important for a chaplain to understand the institution. So I had just sort of placed myself in the middle of the chamber so I could watch this remarkable experience of counting the electoral college votes. Not every American gets to see that. You know, C-SPAN shows it, but not, you know, to have, you know, essentially a front row seat to the pomp and circumstance and the deliberate actions that our representatives and senators take to do things right. Anyway, so there I was. And I don't know that I need to tell the whole story, but obviously a lot of things started taking place. And it was obviously there had been a Capitol policeman came into the room and said, there's been an incursion and we're going to evacuate you to another space. In all of that, however, because I have been in combat, because I have been in crisis situations and mass casualty situations, because of my training, I knew to follow instructions. I knew what my role is. And I think that's the most important part to share with other chaplains. You need to know where your space is and what, in military service, particularly on a ship, need to know where your battle station is. Where do you go when there's an announcement of an emergency? And so my place was with my people. And so when they moved us to another place, I went with them, and to be knowing that people were looking at me, and I don't know how much you can see, but I wear a clerical collar, and I chose to do that. Presbyterians don't ordinarily do that, occasionally, for hospital visits and so forth. But in military service, I had a big honking cross. Everybody knew I was a chaplain, and here I am, certainly brand new to the job, and I wanted to make sure people knew that I was their chaplain, and to kind of put that forward. So I'm walking among them with this collar, and that engendered conversations. It engendered pastoral care responsibilities. And I will tell you one story where a young staffer was bringing his congressman, to the undisclosed location, the other room. And we're in the middle of COVID, and this particular member was suffering from long-term COVID. And so he was having a great deal of difficulty getting to where they were sending us. And the Capitol policeman came and said to the staffer, "We've got him, we'll take care of him, you go on ahead to the room." And so he watched his member go away, and then I watched him sort of dissolve, because he had a purpose initially, and he knew his responsibility was to his member, and that gave him strength and courage. And as soon as that was taken away from him, he lost his sense of purpose and his strength. And so I took his arm as if he were leading me, and we kept on walking. And as one does in ministry of presence, I just began a conversation with him. I said, "Tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what's going on." He says, I'm really frightened. I said, "Well, tell me what you're frightened about." He said, "Well, I think I'm going to die today." And I said, and honestly, I don't know, I didn't have any right to say this, but I had every reason to say this, because I knew how God was working with me. I felt that what you called a hedge of protection. It was a covering that I felt. It was tangible. And we're standing right next to each other. So I knew he was under that covering too. And I said, "You're not going to die today." And he immediately lightened. That was just one of several conversations throughout that day. But knowing that my role was to share with him, to be able to convey to him that God's got this. And God's got us. That was really important, and that was the role I played then throughout the rest of that day. When one is, just like for him, when he was playing his role as assistant to his member, he was fine. When I'm playing my role, living my role as chaplain and shepherd and caretaker, and the one who loves them as God loves them, that gives me strength and purpose and courage.
Yes. Ooh, that is powerful, though. That really is a powerful story. That's why I wanted you to share that with our listeners. And I just wondered too. Now I know you had said the main role that you play is to open the house, where you open those meetings, those with prayer. Do you ever have individuals though that do come and seek you out? Maybe they want that one-on-one time with you.
It's not quite as aggressive as it is in military service. Nobody comes down to my office. Very few people come to my office, but I go to them. God gave me 2 ears for a reason, so I listen. I may be talking to one person, but I can hear with the other ear that somebody's talking to somebody else about a surgery that they're going to have, or something's taking place in their life, or people will come to me and say, "Do you know that so-and-so just lost his mother?" And the members will do that. And so I'll finish the conversation, then I'll move on to the next person. And then that becomes, what we would call, pastoral care, but a moment of grace for them where they are, so that they don't have to think about coming down or making an appointment. Their lives are very busy. There is no white space in their lives. And more importantly, there's no space to be vulnerable. there's no opportunity where they can take care of themselves without, major intention. And so, as you know, as we all know, our spirituality tends to get back burner when everything else is as it should not, but it's what happens. Our spirituality takes the back burner when it comes to, when things are just flying around us and we have things to do and obligations to fulfill.
Yes. And, I guess a question I want to close with is, I know that you are married and your husband also has served in the military. Does that give him, do you feel, a better understanding of what you do?
Oh, absolutely. So we met in the military,
Okay.
and he's a person of faith, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but he's a person of faith.
Okay.
And so that we already had that. And then during our military service, both of us understood what obligation is. And so when one had to deploy, the other one knew who had to take on, what other responsibilities. We're very, there's very little stress in our lives about that kind of obligation. We both appreciate the fact that we're under authority. And it's our responsibility, our spiritual responsibility, to respond to that authority with our whole selves. And we get it. He gets it. And so, yes, that was an incredible partnership that we have and had when I was serving, when we were both serving.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Chaplain Margaret Grun Kibben, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I'm so honored and humbled. Truly appreciate this. And thank you for your service. And thank you that you are really continuing to serve. I greatly admire you and the work that you do.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you who are listening and for your service as chaplains. It's a very important time for us because people aren't going to church or to synagogues or to mosques. Some are, obviously, but there are a lot of people that we encounter in the places where we're working that people have left the church with some bad feeling or have never darkened the door of a church and any other faith or worshiping area. And so they just don't understand what they don't understand. And I do believe in what Augustine said years ago, that our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, until they rest in God. And we are at the front lines of restlessness in our ministry in chaplaincy. And so this is where we have an amazing opportunity to give people some peace as we bring God and faith into the conversation.
Yes. Well, I can't think of a better way to close us out. So I will just say to the listeners, to the viewers, thank you for being here. And may God bless you. May you be well. And may you be here next time for another episode of 30 Minutes With. All right. God bless.
God, we believe for it. What are you believing for this morning?
Jesus.
He said it. He'll do it.